First of all, let me introduce myself. I'm Leonard Markovic, professor of oncology, internal medicine, and hematology. I was probably one of the oldest people here, and I have more than 50 years of experience in oncology, everywhere in the world. I started in Yugoslavia, then go to Sweden, then Malmö, to Europe, and finally went to the United States. I really enjoyed the presentation today because I've heard many things that I know from a long time ago, but always it's nice to see a new and modern approach to the same things. However, I'd like to tell you something else. I was approached by Mimi and Amin about five months ago, and they wanted to help Egypt. So I said, yes, we would like to help Egypt too, but give me some information about Egypt, because our idea is to help everybody in the world. And they came to me with a very strange results. They showed me that there is no really cervical cancer screening in Egypt, because they were not able to show that there is any data. Also, WHO did not show any data about Egypt. There was empty space there. Why? We have a minister here who was talking that very nice job was done there. So probably it was not registered, but it was not in the knowledge of the public knowledge. It's not registered, it's not registered in Global Count, which is WHO statistical information. It's not registered in IARC, International Agency Against Cervical Cancer. It's not registered in any place. So that was the first thing, why it is not there. Second, it's even more important, is that Egypt has best place to live because there is no cervical cancer there. Only 500 women are dying, having cancer per year, and only 300 are dying. My God, this is absolutely impossible. The world statistic is also not so good, because the world statistic is carrying out only 20% of the people. The only good statistic is the United States, because more than 80% of United States people are screened. And all of these women probably know about this much better than me. So the idea is we have to have Egyptians, because we are meeting with current ambassador of Egypt. We have people who would like to go there to help, and I belong to a group that are trying to help women everywhere in the world. Egypt is 80 million people. There are 27 million women at risk. About 10,000 at least should have cervical cancer per year. 500 is a shame for Egyptian policy. As a matter of fact, I'm sorry to tell this, but because in Yugoslavia I was in a very high political position, I can tell this openly. So, what to do? And Professor Oliveira Markovic presented that today there are tools that can be organized and used if there is a will and there is not resources. Political will and organized people to do this. So, but the will must be addressed to two particular populations. One is a poor population that has no any kind of organized policy, and let's say the truth. Let us rich people pay for the poor. And this is the strategy that we developed for India, and I think it's a very applicable one to Egypt. And I think You can always come to see us. We can send for a couple of hours probably and discuss about Egypt situation, and we can do something to be improved. So the tools are present, the policy is present, and very important thing, Egypt is starting to be a developing country. That means that middle class is growing faster than the population. And that means that health care is becoming demanding to the policy of Egyptian leaders. So this is the moment that Egypt should meet with the change in the strategy identified for the Islamic Council. I enjoyed the presentation. I would like to speak with Trujillo, but not specific things right now. It was my wish, impressed by this conference, by presence of the ambassador, by presence of the minister, by presence of all of you, and by invitation of Mimi. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So maybe to streamline off of that comment, what kinds of challenges did you face when you were working in Egypt about getting data on statistics?
Well, this is a very good comment, and I agree with you totally. It's vital, and that's why in 1997 we made a cancer registry. And I issued a ministerial decree that cancer is a notifiable disease. And till now, this decree is valid. But the collection of data, what happened? We got a real cancer registry with 8 regional departments all over Egypt, and we're collecting data. I know that somebody is going to ask me about this today, and I asked one of my assistants when I was a minister to send me some of the old data. I have some of the old data, and I'll try to email it to you. And you will be surprised, because we were assisted by Hoda Anton, who is a very good professor in epidemiology in the University of California, Irvine, and she mastered training the personnel that we had at this time, because you need for cancer registry personnel. But the unfortunate thing that is happening in Egypt, that many things wasn't taken with the research side eye. Because if you want to get heard, the best way is to do research and to get this heard for everybody. But this wasn't really processed. But I can see now, in the year 2008 and 2009, they started to produce some data of the old, not all the old, but the new data about the cancer registry and these things. I have the old data I'm going to send you, and also I wanted to tell that people are saying there wasn't screening in Egypt, and there wasn't. No, there was screening, and one of the things that we used to teach the women in the women's club, how to feel her breast and how to check her breast and things like this. And we used to give them free reproductive health care. Even if she needed an operation, she can get it free. And we saw that the human part of the human rights is the women should have a quality reproductive health free at this time. And that's why this initiative was supported, I must admit, by the Italian also. They worked with us in this respect, and we did a lot of work, especially in Upper Egypt, and it was a very successful way of detecting cancer early, because you know we didn't detect it. And we have another initiative for children, and in this initiative, they proved, and this is also published, they proved that when we have the early detection and all this, there was 75% of success in the treatment compared to the old rate of 40% they had before early diagnosis. But I agree with you that this is very important. Thank you very much.
I don't know if I can carry this all the way here. So I'm going to
You can come on.
Thank you for all the speakers. My name is El-Shami, and I'm not a medical scientist or from the medical community, but I spent the last 40 years of my life in academia, teaching in different universities in the United States. And I want to forward this to Dr. Salam and Dr. Khaled. Maybe Dr. Trujillo will reflect on it. At least in my field, it is so obvious that basic research or cutting-edge research is too expensive for developing countries, especially with a country like Egypt, which is now failing economically. Is it possible that at least for 10 or 15 or 20 years, whatever, we leave the cutting-edge research to the developed world and we only gather data and statistics and basically borrow from others until, at least economically, we can afford? Because I hear a lot of just talk about scientific research, and I know very well how expensive it is for especially developing countries. What do you both, since you know the two worlds of academia, research, and developing countries and development?
I agree with you, but there is an economic basis, and also there is another side that we are not serious with the research. And even every attempt that came to Egypt came in Nasser days, the first attempt, and we cannot deny it. He appointed a minister for research, and he was very serious, this minister, not the Nasser only. He was very serious to get research going. But he didn't have success because there wasn't sustainability. But the problem that we have, that we have people now, they want to get on with the easiest side of research. They don't want the basic research. They want to make a research and all these stories. And when they go abroad, they do a very good research. When they come to our side, they are not encouraged because of the cost and because of the problems. And this is one of the aspects that we have to insist in the near future. And I want to tell you, before I was a minister, when I was a heart surgeon, I thought about academic research and how I can make basis for academic research in cardiac surgery but basic research. And that's why I got a lady called Hoda Talat Harb. She was a daughter of the man who made the first successful banking and the companies in Egypt. And she gave us almost about £6 million at this time, and I'm a very good fundraiser. And we made the academy for cardiac surgery. And when we made the academy for cardiac surgery, by the time we made the building, I went to the ministry. But instead of looking about this, I was looking to bring all the academicians in Egypt working on blood, working on heart, working on all, in vascular, in basic physiology, to come in this building and to initiate something which we start to recognize how to deal with the basic research that is directed business research. But unfortunately, after I left, they changed the academy to become clinical, more clinical. But I agree with you, Dr. Safi, that's very important that we get on to see that basic research should have its place. And also, we will never be able to cross the gap between us and develop the country unless we are serious about it. But there is one side in it, which is economical. With the globalization, the power is concentrated away from us, and the power is going in the other direction. That's why we don't have resources for raising money for basic research like what's happening here. And that's why we need also to redirect the attention of the politician that they have to formulate special budgeting for research. But this also is going to conduct us a little bit more, because I feel that politicians in our country, they don't believe in research. because he's talking and what he's saying is the best what in the world. But it's not true. If you want to have something, and this is what I've learned with the technical support offer that I made in my ministry, I learned many things from the young guys who did research for me, who came with data, who came with conclusion. And if the politician in Egypt started to believe in this, this will be a big step also to add for the success of the programs, and even if it is political, economical, medical, that they will have a foundation or basis to make the right path in the future. Thank you very much.
Dr. El-Shami or Dr. Triad?
The microphone is working.
There's two microphones.
The answer to your question is I disagree that Egypt should actually focus on data gathering and statistical data collection rather than actually trying to catch up with the cutting-edge research as you describe it before it's too late. The gap is widening. I think Egypt has a lot of resources. There is a lot of laboratory space. There is a lot of people who are sent abroad to elite universities and research institutions. But the problem primarily is in a culture that is inimical to research. It's still a patriarchal society. There is heavy presence of tradition and religion in the public sphere that basically would preclude research. Research as a value is not upheld in the Egyptian society. There is a huge laboratory space in a place called Maaty Moderator. I visited myself. It's very impressive. But no one is working there, and there is no focus. People are more involved in self-promotion rather than really trying to produce quality science. It is very important also for the economy. Scientific discovery is the engine that drives the economy, that brings investment. And finally, not all research has to be very expensive and a multi-billion-dollar industry. The pap smear that everyone was talking about today essentially was invented by a Greek penniless immigrant who came to the US in 1913, Papa Nicolaou, who basically was given a dungeon in a basement using Q-tips to collect cells from the cervix of guinea pigs. And when he actually wanted to develop this concept into humans, he was doing a pap smear on his wife on a daily basis in a remarkable display of marital fortitude. I'm not, of course, calling for people to use their wives as experimental subjects, but my point is that pap smear essentially reduced the burden of cervical cancer by several orders of magnitude. Cervical cancer, with all due respect to people who are working on it, has become more or less a historical disease, like TB and diphtheria. Very few women have cervical cancers thanks to a very cheap test that was developed with very cheap technology. It is the prime example of a cancer-preventing test that no other test comes very close to that. So I think Egypt should, despite all its problems and all the issues that are probably more pressing at first blush, but in fact I think it is very important that Egypt adopts a policy and even cultural adjustments to make research a more valuable presence in the society and in the economy at large. Thank you.
Well, let me give you my perspective regarding your question. I think it's on the contrary. That's the time, is the time when the economical difficulties are, is to get embarked in this kind of business. The business for the future relies no longer on natural resources, relies on investment of our brains and all this. And let me tell you the example of Brazil. Brazil a few years ago, as you remember, it was one of the, Argentina was even richer than Brazil. Brazil now is the fifth economy in the whole world. And let me tell you what happened. We don't need to do big research. Like, for example, even myself, I can see the example happen to my life. I came to Harvard University, so they spent billions, millions of dollars for that. But the problem is that even in the United States, 95% of the science doesn't make any difference when it comes to the public health. They don't reach, they don't translate it, and that's a major problem. In developing countries, we actually need to embrace that, because the research that we need to do is the research that has application. If you have an idea in research that you cannot sell a product, then you don't want to be in that research. you want to become part of that. And in order to do that, for us, it needs to be three components. You need to have the government, yes, the universities, and the private sector. And this is the combination that needs to be that, because the ideas that come from that is very expensive. It's come from the universities. But after you have that, governments will give you grants to the universities to apply that. But then the private sector is the one who can invest in producing this product. And the situation, for example, with CERCA, you know, is I got some grants, but then I got some angel investors to produce that. And now our company it went to the stock, I mean, really, really amazingly. It just won, and we're now moving very forward, very positive. So, and in fact, we were talking a lot with governments in Central America and South America, and they say, yes, this is the time because the developing countries only will have research in cancer and cardiovascular diseases, but the problems that we have, for example, in diagnosis for diarrhea, we can make a test. I'm from Mexico. You know, tequila is one of our main famous drinks. You may have a tequila. I was talking to one of the presidents from that region, and he was telling me that tequila, it brings them $1 billion of the economy. But I was telling them, you know, they say, in Mexico we have a tradition that if you get sick, catching a cold, you drink a little tequila, and with a chicken soup, you get better. And I was telling, I said, jokes, we all have that tradition. We go, now let's think for a second. Let's discover if the tequila, during the whole process of the fermentation, there is an ingredient that can be antiviral for viral. And if we can decrease 2 or 3 days the viral disease, imagine that company how much is worth it. And we can produce it in Mexico. Like Brazil, my friend, he has produced 64 companies with ideas to the student, the government helps them, but the private sector is the one involved. So for this one needs to be a combination of that, and that's my experience that has been working in these countries. And Mexico is moving with the 14th economy right now. And look at the history of Singapore. Look at the history of Taiwan, Hong Kong, South Korea. And this is the time for all our countries that we can invest in science, because one of the 5th economies in the world is biotechnology. And if we don't embrace biotechnology today, you will be behind, but more than ever in history. And that's, you know, it's a perspective that I've been seeing in my countries, and that this is very important to invest, but be a strategic investment, not trying to compete with Johns Hopkins, with Harvard, with, you know, these places. No, we cannot compete at level. But we should be more practical and facing and taking care of our situations that face more in our communities. Thank you.
Thank you. Just a few words. In my opinion, in the developing countries, the biggest problem is lack of infrastructure. It is very difficult to build an infrastructure. In order to have one pathologist, for example, and specialist in cytopathology, you have to have medical school, specialization, subspecialization. It needs decades to build infrastructure, to have professionals on the point of care. And this is why it need not to be so expensive. Embrace telemedicine, embrace mobile health, have a specialist in the center, have a low-trained technician there, discover biomarker that you do not need the FBI to detect the criminals. Biomarker will detect this criminal. So let us embrace the new achievement in the 21st century, telemedicine, to bridge lack of infrastructure, which is difficult to develop, and make cell phone a doctor in the pocket, and go forward with low cost, simple, applicable, and affordable methods. It is possible. That's I stand firmly behind that. Thank you.
I think we have another question.
My name is Mohammed Shinawi. I am a media person and community activist, being the president of the Egyptian American Cultural Association. So from these two hats, I would ask about two things. One is awareness, two is action. The problem in Egypt is, as mentioned in the presentations, is the lack of awareness of such a disease. And in order for people to move, they have to be aware. So Dr. Markovich was talking about a website that people can read the whole book. That will never happen in Egypt. And Claudia talked about the cultural barriers within the community here, which is the same case in culture like the Egyptian culture. So what I'm suggesting is, with the collection of expertise that we got here, if we can just produce like half a page from each expert, I'm ready to translate it into Arabic and then make it available for our community here and send it overseas. Then from that knowledge, people would start to move. Then we come to the latest technology. And my question to Dr. Roberto is, how feasible is to train doctors in Egypt about the new technology and make it available not at the same level of cost that is here in the United States? Thank you.
Actually, that is actually very not so difficult at all. In fact, this is. I'm glad that you asked me that question. I just put the time in. One thing, once again, I have lived my experience. I move in my life because of all these things. I always tell people I discovered the chamber of the time machine. Because when I used to be, I was living in Massachusetts for 15 years before moving to NIH and the University of Maryland, I used to teach graduate school, and I used to teach undergrad, and my science and molecular biology and cell biology and all these heavy courses that I have the privilege to have like 7 of my professors that were Nobel Prize winners. And then I went back to my village, a small town, and my high school students, they asked me to give a lecture, or even my own friend doctors from Mexico. And I need to teach these big sciences small, and they used to tell me they feel like they was like being in the movie theaters, and they listen to a nice movie and that's it. But then as time passes, we realize that one of the most important things is education in children. They need to have the passion for science. They need to have, one of the most important is to understand that if you understand physics and you understand chemistry and you understand that, you can actually make a big impact in the economy. And unfortunately, we like in Mexico to train much about history, but not so much about this area. So we're actually now making programs for kids that they understand that it's more key to do more science. And we're creating, you saw some of the movies, but we're creating a lot of programs of movies in a way to enhance them, to say this is the way you can do that. And so when that happened, areas, biotech, all the science is not too expensive if you do that, because if you want to make a test, a very simple test, doesn't require too much money. And in fact, it's a problem. For example, one of my papers I am publishing, that I discovered after 20 years that the AIDS virus can be prevented in people who have a parasite. And the reason is the parasite, the tenial solvent that produces eggs in the brain and produces epilepsy, is called neurocysticercosis. And that parasite actually protects the virus to enter into the cell. The research was not too much, not too expensive, and we discovered finally with a little bit that the most incredible event. Actually, Nature has been a few times asking for that publication, but we wanted to make sure everything what we're saying. But what I'm saying is, and I said to them, look at that, this is the science that we're going to bring into the AIDS field that you could never do in the United States or in Europe. We did in Brazil and Mexico because of our diseases that we have. And so that's why it needs to be in a point that, in order to turn the point, it's not right away, of course, it takes time. But let me tell you, we have a fantastic doctors in Mexico, in Central. I have met in every country in the world, fantastic doctors. But unfortunately, they cannot apply what they have to create technology because there is no basic training. But even with but they are great biologists there. Only they need to learn 1 and 2. Only one person, 2 people can make a big difference in a country. And that's why it takes only a few of them. And then it's a cascade. You don't expect it, from night to day to build drone, like we say that. But this is something can be happening. And I see Brazil is moving tremendously. The government gave $3 billion for education to children to go outside the country. And they are doing it because they want to compete for the future. And so even if we have, 1, 2, 3, 5 leaders in that field, it can make the difference. And then try to see who you are. If you're a biologist, if you're a physicist, you're a chemist, let's do something together. And then let's work with a guy who is a corporation, who is a business. Because listen, doctors and scientists, we are terrible in business. We don't know business. We need to marry with the business people. We need to marry with the corporation, because if someone will tell you, if you make this company that way, it's better for taxes. And you can bring more funds this way. And this is the way. And so this is, in order to do this science, it's like it needs to be the village. It needs to be everybody involved with that. And we need to train our people, and eventually, and one of my friends, which is the last thing I need to tell you, is the 7th member of the Nobel Prize Committee, Charlie Norby. When he came, one of his first meetings in Mexico, after he saw in the small village, the little artisanal people making these two plastics, that he needs to put the 2 pieces separate, and he couldn't do that. And the little guy who only finished 6th grades, 6th grades elementary school, he says, "Wow, that is so easy to do that." He didn't know even this guy. He said, "You're so smart. How can you do this?" And he was saying to the people, if you guys invest on education in your kids, 20 years from now, you will have Nobel Prize winners in medicine from Mexico. I mean, the reason why we have Nobel Prize winners is because we invest money. That's the history. So let's learn today from our future. And it's a combination. We need to bring technology, the new one, to the countries. We need to back and forth, but we need to build something. I mean, look at history. Egyptians, our culture with the Mexicans and our Mayas, it was the most greatest science. Look at the history with the minister. I mean, when you see the history, that was fantastic. We couldn't do at the time. It was even difficult to think it that way. Imagine what we have today. We can make a big difference, but we need to talk to each other. And when it's a point that it's a turn point, especially when you're in the bottom of things, is the time when you need to get up and do this. And this is what, and one thing you need to have, given the passion, but especially starts at home, starts with the kids, to have something that can change the country.
Thank you. Can I just add something about awareness? I did a talk in Egypt about a year ago at a breast cancer conference, and the room was filled with young, talented med students and doctors, and they were really interested in awareness, and they were asking me how we do it in the U.S. And one of the things that they were saying was that in Egypt, one of the things they don't do there is media campaigns. Like here in the U.S., during October, it's Breast Cancer Awareness Month, and we're told 1,000,000 times to get our mammogram. And they were asking, why can't we do that here and we can get the message out? But the thing that I also talked to them a little bit about is capacity. The challenge of awareness is that you can go out and you can educate a community about getting a mammogram, but do you have the capacity to give those mammograms? And one of the things that we see with the Arab community is that in a lot of the Arab countries, mammography is used as a diagnostic tool, not as much as a screening tool. And that's a challenge for us, is we have to teach women that they can use it here as a screening tool. So it is a challenge with awareness. I mean, you can go out, then you're going to have 100 women that want a mammogram, and do you have the capacity to give those women the mammogram? And in Egypt, that was one of the things they were saying, is that they don't feel like they do have the capacity to give mammograms to everyone that is educated. So I just want to point that out, because we talk a lot about awareness, and awareness is a really great thing, but you just have to also look at the challenge of it and be able to actually serve the communities. And it's something that we struggle with in the U.S. here as well. Again, in New York we're very privileged, but in other parts of the U.S. they do education and then they can't actually provide the services to people, and it really puts you in an ethical dilemma that what have you really done for this group if you can't deliver on the service?
And then I guess I'll just ask one last question to kind of round off our conference today. And I want to first target this to Ms. Ayesh, and then I want to open it up to the rest of the panelists to add in a couple more, for a few minutes each, what your opinions are. But what are can you kind of discuss a bit about the challenges you face with dealing with the community and getting the community active, and particularly cultural differences? I know in my personal practice I've noticed that there have been patients where I've had hesitance because they don't want to get their pap smears because the women are not married yet and they're 25, 26, and now the age is going up. So what are the difficulties you're facing with reaching out to the community, and then if each of you could also discuss that too, that would be great.
So I think some of the biggest challenges that we face, I had mentioned this earlier, is the issue of marriageability. And this is something that is really prevalent, I would say, more in Arab communities than we see in other communities. You know, the impact that the diagnosis has on the family, and if people know there's cancer in a family, that they think there's something wrong with the family, and they worry about unmarried sisters and unmarried daughters. So how do we change that way of thinking so people can be more open? You have all the patients I've ever worked with, I've only ever had one patient who would identify herself as a breast cancer survivor. The others will not. We've even had issues where some of our patients won't come to our support program. We had one woman who was Syrian, and there was another woman who was Syrian, and she was afraid because she knew that she talked a lot. She was afraid that if she showed up at this group, this would be, you know, back to her village in Syria. So these are things that we deal with. Also, the issue of fatalism. When we talk to a lot of these women, every story that they know about cancer is always about somebody dying. It's very rare they ever tell us a story about someone who had cancer who was doing well and went on to have a family. So that's something that, you know, we try to work with them about the importance of early detection. I think this goes back to what I said earlier about, you know, screening being more of a diagnostic tool as opposed to a screening tool. So I think those are some of the biggest challenges that we really see with the community. Again, we're able to address language barriers and cultural barriers fairly easily, but some of these, you know, deep-rooted beliefs are harder to address, and it's something that we're constantly working to change.
Thank you very much, and I enjoyed this meeting, and it was a great opportunity to meet with all these great people that we have seen today. And I just wanted to touch that we should be careful a little bit about the limitations that we have in the developing countries. I'm not talking about Egypt, developing countries. The limitation, for example, we are talking about detection, early detection of breast cancer, early detection of survival. But we don't know that we have a problem which takes 10% of the patient, of the population in infective hepatitis. We don't know also at the same time that in say about 200 villages, water is not accessible. So there are certain limitations that will make priorities in developing countries. But at the same time, at the decision-making level, we don't have the institutional capacity that will continue and sustain even the progress we are making. That's one of the problems, and this is the biggest problem, because we have institutions, but the institutions is shifting according to the leader. If the leader came tomorrow and say research is a stupid thing, we don't want to waste our money, everybody will think, and also the media will follow the song because they will get some advertisement, and they will say these people have wasted the money on the research. That's why the beautiful thing we see in developed world, that the institution cannot be influenced by the politician that are coming. If I have tomorrow change the Minister of Health, do you feel it? In the United States, you don't feel it. And also at the same time, the Surgeon General is not subject that can be changed by the government. You know, he has 5 years, and after the 5 years, there will come another 5. And that's why the strong here is the institution, not the politician, and not the leader they select randomly. Also, we have a problem in the human resources, and the problem in the institutions, we have problems in the human resources. We don't invest to get the best out of the human resources that we had, and even if we got them, we don't give them the right place. And that's why you get, for example, in an institution, and it's working beautifully or something like that, and second day, they will get a guy that had no experience, and they put it on the head because he is the brother-in-law of the president or the brother-in-law of prime minister or something like this, and things goes up and down. That's why these things we have to understand, and that's why we are saying, although what's happening in Egypt that is alarming, but is heading towards democracy. and is heading towards a stage. We are still in the immaturity stage. We want to talk, we want to curse each other, we want to fight each other, we want to make 100 divisions, but this is healthy, because at a stage they will realize what's democracy about. And then at this stage they will realize what is the institution like. The third problem that we have, our resources are directed by the business, and we are a second user for every business, or the tertiary user, or the number 20 user. That's why we are not really getting anything like benefit you get in the developed world. For example, you can make the machine and you sell it to the rest of the world. You can make some sort of invention and it goes to the rest of the world. You don't have this in the developed world. And that's what also I keep insisting, that democracy is the right way in getting business to go in the correct direction. Because we are seeing now, for example, with a change of politician, all the other businessmen were bad and the new business people are good. This is crazy. And that's why we are now wanting to reach a stage of maturity where we invest in institution, invest into human resources, invest into strategies and reforms that will help this institution to pick up what they lost in the past. And I just wanted to be fair that I must tell you, although we're saying there is no screening, this is not true. And you don't tell them, I'm worried, because you tell them you don't have this and all this, and everybody will fight you, because they have made several attempts. And I have seen in my days, the Italian help, the NGO did a lot of work, and beautiful work was done by the NGOs, and all these things. But unfortunately, if the institution, they have invested in also what we say, the cancer registers. The cancer register stopped for 6 years after I left, and then they picked up after 6 years. So that's where I feel that, you know, it's not the problem just superficial as we see it. The problem is deep, and it has to be treated with a revolution like the revolution we have seen. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Not much actually. My only comment again is that culture is the main issue that is at the heart of all problems involved in the subject we're discussing today, from awareness, from training, as you said. I mean, there's no shortage of foreign-trained physicians and scientists in Egypt. In fact, since the early 1980s, late 1970s, Egypt sent tens of thousands of people to do PhDs and MS abroad. All of them came back only to establish private practices, writing on them that this is a fellow of Ohio State and this is a former professor at Stanford. Not a single decent piece of scholarly work came out of all those people that the country spent a ton of money to educate abroad. There is no shortage. That's not the problem. The problem is the culture. We go back to a society whose definition of success is to have a private practice with a huge placard written on it some nonsense, as opposed to actually producing science and publishing. It's not something that is held in high esteem in Egypt. And unless the culture changes to readdress this issue, unless the culture changes to address the issue of awareness, to address the issue of the inferior status of women in the society, and I know this is frustrating for people here who are true activists and who are trying to help the country, but without breaching the cultural barrier that kept Egypt a backward country for more than 100 years, it will not happen. It will not happen.
Can I just quick comment? I think it's I am not as pessimistic as my colleagues, because I have seen the change in 20 years in Latin America. Of course, it's different. It's my region, and I can share with you quickly one thing. Definitely, listen, when I, by the way, back to my own experience, I could tell you, when I came to Harvard, I was the first Mexican in the history. I was a generation 358 ever a Mexican accepted in Harvard in medical sciences, PhD. It was a sad day for me. It was not a happy day, because I see all my friends from Asia, many of them come here. But by the way, we did an action. In 2004, We created a program between Harvard and Mexico. Today, 25 Mexican citizens can enter every year at Harvard with a scholarship of $250,000. But this was one step because, and a colleague mentioned before, it's true. If you can be a great thing, if you back to the country, there is no infrastructure, there is no money. So how you can do that? Or you build private practice, or you return to the country where they trained you because you don't feed. And the reason you don't feed is because you don't have houses to build the science. But independent of the houses is the investment. So you need to have the three components. The training, number one, the leaders. Number two, you need to have the buildings that can be combined with government, private practice, and university and investors. And then you need to have the area for what is your leadership, because the greatest thing is when you can produce your own products. This is what is the future, and that's what I emphasize that. But today, for example, now that I am an adjunct professor at Johns Hopkins, today we're creating that at least 5 positions today, the doctors and scientists from Mexico can come to Johns Hopkins to train in a master's degree in biotechnology and business, because that's what we lack. If you don't have a great mind, but they don't know how to do business, how are you expected to do business? They cannot do that. And business is a way you do your private practice, or you do a lab, or you do actually a company. So basically, and this is what happened, but it needs to be a step by step, it needs to be the training of the people. That's why I really believe, and politicians, for example, you know, in Latin America, we lost $3.3 billion every year for cervical cancer. The age of 25 to 45, the first cancer of death in Latin America is cervical cancer. It's not even breast cancer. So we have, 50,000 women die every year. And so this is the reason why when politicians tell you, you can save money, you can be the leader and have your flag to say, I am the one who remove that or screen that, and they like it. And the operative people, you spend a lot of money, now you can spend only $1 billion. Oh, that's great. And then this is, so it's a combination. Everybody needs a little hat to say, how can I say something that is good for me? But anyway, this is for Latin America. I know Egyptian is different, but I think we can start with that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Sorry. So I think
just one sentence. I didn't mean to speak. I just wanted to say that there is a light in front of us. There is optimism, and then we can do better and make this world a better place to live.
Thank you.
That's a perfect way to end. Thank you so much for everyone. Thank you to all our speakers who took out time from your busy days to come and join us today. And thank you to all of you who stayed through despite the food and the systems. And hopefully we'll look forward to future symposiums.